Hello, welcome to Jesus TV, and the program is called Jesus in This Mess, where we learn more and more about how we can find Jesus even in the messy times of our lives. And we've got a real mess going on in 2023 globally, but I guess the world's always been like that. And so um, we are without our artist, designated artist, Emily Powell, who stepped away um, to work on other projects with Jesus. So we hope she returns, but we leave that between her and Jesus, and wish her well um, on her vacation. We all get to take vacations from different things. And so that's the parable of the vacation that I'll introduce the topic to. Jesus gives me these different parables. So most people are familiar with biblical parables. When you use that term parable, oftentimes your mind rivets to scriptural. But the truth is, our lives are a living parable. The Jesus does nothing but teach by parable. There's actually a scripture. I'll let you look it up and Google it. But we learn symbolically. Sociologists would call it symbolic interactionism. That's really the only way we can comprehend reality is we have to create some, we could call them placeholders, symbolic understandings, including language and the things that are around us, assigning them name, assigning them meaning. And it's very pliable, flexible, messy, actually, to tie into our theme, Jesus in This Mess. But Jesus, as I get closer to him, he will give me more and more parables to process life by, understanding stories. And that's another way you can understand it. Jesus talks in stories, and sometimes the best stories he'll do is he will give you experience. That's the most impactful way in which, so you'll actually have your own story. Maybe it's an approximation of somebody else. So I was just like Job, and now it's superseded Job because you're like, okay, well, it wasn't exactly like Job, but here's what happened to me. So the vacation parable came when I have a friend who has mental health problems. He's bipolar, and my interaction with him kind of dropped off. And I said, "Oh, you must be on a vacation." And I said, "Now, not all vacations are good vacations. Most people who've been on vacations go, sometimes it's called the vacation from hell. And so you get your ticket and you're going to go on this cruise, and you anticipate it's going to be wonderful because you saw the brochures and you saw, oh, they've got a pool that they actually overestimated how big that pool was. And so when you actually get on that boat, you realize, oh, yeah, right. What are 800 people going to do with the pool? The pool always seems full. And we're the good looking people because in the brochure, it showed good looking people. I mean, I'm not good looking, but I just hoping to look at some good looking people, but it's just a bunch of slobs like me. And the number of people is making me worried. Is that pool clean? And so you're like, oh, okay, well, let's just make the best of it. Well, it turns out when you get there, the pool's not even in order. They say, oh, yeah, so we had some difficulties. We're sorry. We're going to apologize to you. And the pool's not even available. And then they showed you the room, and that also seemed to be overly estimated in the pictures. You're like, whoa, that's pretty big. But whatever they can do with a camera, and they didn't tell you that the adjoining cabins are some young people who love to party all night long and then sleep all day long. You're like, well, I like to sleep at night. And so when you bring that up to the helpers, they say, hey, I'm sorry. We've told them to quiet it down, and you don't drink. And so the thing that seems like you can do on this vacation is, if you're on that boat, is you can drink. And if you're not a drinker, then anyhow, I don't have to keep painting a dark picture of this vacation. That doesn't sound like a good cruise, but you decide, well, let's take some pictures because we want to show the family because they were like hopeful for us. So let's get off the boat. And because we don't gamble, we don't drink. We went on the wrong cruise. We should have went on that religious cruise, but we thought, oh, a bunch of religious nuts. But I'm telling you what, I'd rather have religious nuts than people staying up banging on the wall. Oh, I'm sorry, got the wrong place, and drunk, and everything's about gambling and their entertainment. Oh yeah, our sous chef, you finally like, well, at least the food was good. Because the sous chef was so good that they promoted him to a different ship. And now you're left with the assistant cook who wasn't very good. And so the food was nasty. So that's what's called, after many delays getting back and flights and spending more money than you want, that would be called a vacation. You went on a vacation from hell, or in other words, a difficult vacation, to make it less hyperbole. Yes, it was a difficult vacation. You want to do that again? No, no, I don't. And so my friend who was having bipolar, sometimes if you're bipolar, you will have seasons in your life. They could last for a couple of weeks. They could last for a couple of months. And you're on a vacation, whether you know it or not, with Jesus. And it is a depressive vacation. And so using this parable, Jesus was using that. And my friend liked the parable, like, oh yeah, looking at it as a vacation. You came back from vacation. Okay, how was it? And I told him that when you're bipolar, you need to plan on these vacations. Oh, I'm going on vacation. I can feel it coming on, and you need to prepare. So like, okay, so the next time I'm on one of these vacations, we need to bring movies, and we need to bring headphones. We need to bring white noise because we're going to be stuck on this. Somehow this is not a vacation we have a choice in. And so then you prepare. And I call this fortifying yourself in the love of Jesus Christ, finding the things that you love and building a bubble around yourself. So you're like, okay, this is kind of unavoidable, but we can make it better. And so over time, with practice, you can learn to take these vacations. They may never be comfortable if they're like a depressive vacation, but you can make them more comfortable. And that's what I'm speaking of course, is a vacation that we're on. So we're all on, to use the parable, we're on a vacation from heaven. And for some people, like, this is vacation into hell. And there's a lot of people who feel like that. Maybe not all the time, because even a vacation from hell, you can say, they finally fixed the food. They found something that I like, something that was vegan or something, and so halfway through the trip, food did get better because I kept complaining. And so that was good. And they really did have some good things. And so you make the best of it and you make some adjustments. And that's there you've been introduced to the vacation parable. There's other vacations that are just delightful, things you plan and they turn out like you want them to. So there's periods in our lives where we vacate. We leave whatever it is we're doing and we go to a different place. And it could be that we're going there emotionally, or we're actually going there physically, or both. And so I'll leave it with there. You can see the parable for our lives upon the earth, that we're on a vacation, and there's certain things that maybe we thought life would turn out a certain way, that the pool's not as big. In fact, it's not even working. I tried the pool. Every time I go in there, I get dunked, I get bullied. I'm not going to do the pool anymore. I'm not going to share my opinion anymore. People don't like me, and life is hard. But like a vacation from hell or a good vacation, I've become convinced, and Jesus has it as being part of my mission, help people fortify themselves to get ready for difficult vacation. And that's what he helps me do, to make the best of a difficult situation. So there's the parable, Jonathan. I want your thoughts on it, but it does fit Jesus in this mess. It's speaking of a parable of a messy vacation, and trying to make the best of it.
Yeah, it's a good uh, parable, I think. I had a couple of thoughts of um, about vacations as you were saying that. I I find myself thinking about, like, I think life is like a vacation, right? They're
Yeah.
always saying, heaven's home, and we're all away from home. And I've listened to a bunch of near-death experiences, and they say that when they get back, they realize that they're home. And I kind of get that. Like, it's actually a comfort to know that there is a home, because this life so does not feel like home. Um, and I got to open it from the other side. And so um, there's this idea that, and kind of while we're away, right? Like while we're in life, come here, Joey. While we're in life, um, it kind of is like a vacation to hell. Um, I knew there's a quote by somebody who said, I don't expect to see any hell that's more of a hell than this life is hell.
Right.
And, there's the idea of reincarnation. Like, well, what if we're born again and again? And, and it's like, so that's kind of interesting, because that's an idea of like, of hell. It's like the Groundhog Day hell. You never
Yeah.
seen the movie Groundhog Day?
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're not going to go to hell. You're just going to come back and keep living the same life over and over and over and over, until you figure out a way to have a different life. Well, that almost sounds worse than hell in a sense. Um, so if they're right about that, well, and interestingly, in the Eastern philosophies, they've got this idea that their idea of heaven is to escape that cycle. Their idea is to, it's like, well, they're not really looking at like, okay, well, we're going to go to the other side and be in heaven, be back home. They're thinking, okay, well, we're all just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And the way to escape it, and interestingly, it's kind of a cool concept, because it's like, okay, well, the way to escape it is not to die. They have this knowledge that dying's not going to fix it. You know, it's like that's not going to fix anything. And so they have this idea that, they have this mentor, who to them is, well, not all Eastern, but the Buddhists have the Buddha. And the idea is, it's like he found, while he was in life, he found heaven. Wasn't that life changed? Something inside of him changed. And they had this kind of knowledge. It's like, well, if you could find that, maybe you could stop this endless cycle of just coming back and doing the same thing over and over again. So that was one idea that went through my mind. Actually, the idea was just that this life is kind of its own hell, but it can also be heaven, right? So it's like you can have a heaven on earth, but it all has to do with the way that it's like you're talking about that cruise. It's like, well, would it have to be that bad? Could you, and I kind of wonder if the reason why vacations go bad is because we have the idea that it's going to be different than normal life. It's like, but what if life were your vacation and vacation was your life? So then I had this other thought that came to my mind about vacations. What was it? Um, vacations. Oh, vacations from righteousness, vacations from being good. So, um, yeah, this one we'll see. It's like I'm almost hesitant to talk about this one over the air, but I guess we talk about everything. Um, I think partially because what spurned it for me was a thought I had the last couple days because I watched a little clip from one of the general authorities of the church from which you and I both come from. You're still a member. I'm not really, um, but I am. I am at heart, I guess, in some ways. But so um, oh, it's really funny. It feels like our knowledge and understanding of the way that the eternities work needs an update because it seems like right now it's like there's the good people, quote unquote, and the good people believe that everybody should be good and that if they're not good, they're bad. And that's not always the case. It's like they have this idea that temptation is the same for everybody. So like um like, well, I was a young man and I was able to control myself and and be chaste and this and that and the other thing and so they assume that everybody's temptation comes with the same force. It's like, and what I notice about a lot of these people is that they kind of just like got the parental and genetic they hit the parental and genetic jackpot. Uh, and it's like, they had good parents, they had a good upbringing, they had good, all these things like lined up so that it's like, and so, um, but some people are having a vacation from righteousness. It's like some people decided to come down here to this life and not hit the genetic jackpot, not hit the parental jackpot, come down here and have everything be way harder than it is. And the whole message, from what I can tell of the religious, is be good. Just be good. And I consider myself religious, you know, but um, but it's a little bit disturbing to me, and I can see how terribly discouraging it must be to those who came to this life um, and did not opt in for the parental jackpot, for the genetic jackpot, who for them, doing all the right things is pretty much impossible. It's like they are going completely uphill the whole way. Just a second, I'm gonna tune out for a couple seconds here. Just a second.
That's fine.
All right, I'm back. So yeah, so I think that's I find myself just wondering, like I don't want to mention, like I hate, I guess I am already, as I mentioned our own upbringing. It's like and the group of people that we're a part of, we're raised a part of, at least me anyways. Um uh and on the one hand, it's like I think it's really good, but on the other hand, it's like, wow, it's like, are we really going to believe that every ecclesiastical leader in our organization has been flawless. The little talk I saw was about chastity, and I thought to myself, really? Like there is not a single general authority who has ever had a problem with sexual um I don't want to say um what's the word for it? It's impropriety. Really? Really? So there's not a single one who's willing to at some point say, "Hey, yeah, I had a problem with this, and this is what I learned." And it's like I was just trying to process it. It was like
Yeah, that's right. The lack of,
nobody,
yeah, well,
not a single
and
bishop, not a single
no,
stake president, not a
well,
single 70 who ever like had a problem. And it's like, and we're gonna say, and the general authority that was speaking is my favorite general authority. And and he said, and if somebody, slips in up in, he says, if somebody slips up in this, well, then shame on them, and shame on me for not teaching them, for not teaching well enough. It's like, really, that's the only thing that the church can say is do what's right. And if you don't, shame on you. Really? That's the whole entirety of the message about chastity. It's like, what does that do for the person who is is up to their ears in it? You know, it's like who inherited the sins of their fathers. And it's like, sorry, I'm going on and on
no, that's
about it, but
okay.
it was just like I was just kind of flabbergasted. It's like some people come to this life, and I think that some people chose to come to certain families, certain situations, because they wanted to have a vacation from righteousness. And when you say, well, why would somebody want to do that? I think so that they could be like Jesus, because Jesus has compassion. It says that he became sin for us. It's like I don't think we even comprehend what he experienced. And I think there are some other people who it's like, and you say, well, they ought to get right. Yes, they should, and it's like, and Jesus can help them. But it's like, one, it also made me really wonder. It's like, how does it begin that it's like you begin to have like a secret kind of combination or secret society? And it's like, I'm not one of those people that says, oh, the church is all these devils. I don't believe that. I think it's like good people. There's good people who've always done what's right and can't imagine or understand why somebody would have a hard time doing what's right. And then you have people who want to be in those positions and who are unwilling to admit, it's like so you end up with a whole organization with hundreds and thousands of people, none of which are willing to admit, I had a problem with this. That doesn't seem good or healthy in a sense. It's like it's like I think now what I'm saying is I'm not saying that it's like there's no hope, but I'm saying, man, I think something needs to change. You know what I'm saying? Like
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
like it's like you can even like you were talking about, the one true church. It's like, well, a lot of people say the one true church, but if it's like, but it's like, even if you have a degree of truth in your church, doesn't mean that some things in the culture can't change. And if there's anything that needs to change, it's like, I don't know, this seems like something. It's like, and I don't think I even fully realized it till I watched this little clip the other night, and it just so flabbergasted me. It's like, wow, if anything needs to change, like this thing, like, and I'll just say this last thing. Sorry to take so long.
No problem.
It was in Jacob 5, it talks about how, oh, when the master comes the last time, And he says, all the fruit are corrupt. All the fruit are corrupt. And and um and the servant and him are talking, and one of them says, like, well, and what was it that brought this? And there's like this dawning, this realization. He says, is it not because of the loftiness of the branches? And it's like, wow, yeah. It's like, if anything's going to bring corrupt fruit, I wonder if it's our loftiness. All of us, I'm not pointing a finger. It's like if I, if I still have any corrupt fruit in me, for sure, it's probably because I'm not meek and lowly, you know? It's like, so it's, yeah, forgive me, anybody who's listening who may struggle with that. I'm not trying to find fault, or, it's like, but it's something that I wonder if needs to be talked about. So anyways, I'll pass it back.
Well, yeah, that's what we talk about, Jesus in this mess. So it's something that I've pondered for years and years and years. And part of the resolve for me has been to understand the nature of and the limitations of formal organizations. And so I sometimes I'll compare like the church to public school, and um, and that's a good comparison. I wouldn't compare the church to homeschool, although there's kind of been a trend towards emphasis on home church, but there's always been an emphasis on home church. The church operates more like an organization that's formal, like, there's rules for who's in, who's out. These are the steps, and then it operates like schools informally as well, where the expectation is that you're here trying to do the best you can, and we're going to try to emphasize you getting an A, rather than come in and go, you know what, hey, it doesn't matter if I get an A or a D. I'm gonna get D's in all my classes, and I'll still get the same degree as everybody. I just want it to be easier, so I'm going to do that. And so teachers be like, oh well, I see why you're doing that stuff, but you ought to at least shoot for a B. And so the encouragement is always up. And one can argue, even strongly and rightly, having high expectations for people is an important thing. But in so doing, you do leave some people who, yeah, like you say, didn't win the lottery, and they're just like, I'm trying and I try and I try and I get at best C's. Oh, well, you have learning difficulties, sweetie. We didn't recognize those before. We would just kind of promote people and say, oh, it's a mystery. I don't know why these kids are such idiots. We don't call them idiots anymore. We say that's a learning difficulty. So we've learned over time to respond differently to people who can progress differently. Um, but we're not writing any manuals for how to make high school easier by getting C's. No, we don't want to encourage people to float. We want them to really strive. And so there's these tensions, and they're oppositional tensions. If not so, my firstborn in the wilderness, righteousness could not be brought to pass, neither wickedness nor holiness. And so God himself comes down to earth and says, oh yeah, that's what you guys are learning, that you shouldn't uh, um, uh, commit adultery. Well, I'll tell you what, if you lust after a woman, you've already committed adultery in your heart. Like, whoa, Jesus. Well, your expectations are so high. Tell me you've never committed adultery. I've never committed adultery. Tell me you've never had dirty thoughts. I've never had dirty thoughts. Well, what are you? Some kind of freak? No, I'm a god. And only gods can actually do what I just did. Oh, but then why are you telling us mortals to do what only gods can do? I want to have high expectations. I want you to be perfect. Um, okay, so that's all there is. No, that's not all there is. Look who I'm hanging around with. You're hanging around with a bunch of sinners, broken people. Yeah, I got two messages going on here. Which one do you need to hear? And so it it is um, never to be resolved very well, especially by organizations who are run by humans who, compared to Jesus, they're in kindergarten. All of us are like little kids. So we assumed, like, well, there's adults in the room. Don't they know it would be more handy for them to be transparent, even in their own weakness? They know that, but they don't know how to integrate that with formal institutions and not do some damage. Okay, I'll tell you about my sins. Okay, Jonathan, you want to know about them? I'll tell you about them. Well, they do so, they know, at a risk of alienating some other people. Oh my goodness, I'm never going to follow a guy like that. You're like, yeah, but you do stuff like that. I know, but that's why he's a leader. That's why Jesus was a leader, because he didn't do stuff like that. Oh my goodness. And you're like, oh, you're like a little kindergartner that thinks every leader has to be perfect. Well, they should be, or at least striving. And there's no way they should ever go that low that they would do that thing or act that way. And so um, formal institutions like schools aren't aren't promoting homeschool, even though that's a good option. And like if you're getting bullied in the school, because schools will admit, but not publicly, they won't admit, we tolerate some bullying. What? They do. Otherwise, they can shut it down. Just put cameras in everywhere, in every class, and basically zero tolerance policy. We'll run the tapes. You don't have to tell us. Just tell us if you've been bullied. We'll run the tapes, and then that person's never coming back to the school again. Bullying would go zero. Would go to zero. The schools were like, yeah, but it would turn into some kind of, well, right. So you're okay with bullying? Well, no. Well, then why aren't you doing the cameras? Okay, so there's a trade-off. We want to have personal freedom. Yeah, right. And you don't want to have to be so harsh to just rip out all these kids who are little kids trying to find their way. And yes, sometimes they'll bully, sometimes they'll be mean, just like a brother or sister is. This goes on in families. So you don't want schools to become like regimented prisons where every scrap of evidence is being sought. And now the kid has tremendous pressure. He has a bad family. He wants to kind of bully, but as soon as he bullies, he's out. And what's left for him? And so these complexities are not just felt by schools who allow bullying. I used to teach bullying. That's what I tell them. And it's kind of like eye-opening for people. Like, no, you guys allow bullying, but they would never admit that. You can't have that as your policy. We allow bullying, because Greg can tell you how to get rid of all bullying. Like I could bring it down to near zero real quick, because we just remove all the offenders and there's no bullying, and it's a happy place. But institutions have to balance these things. But when they balance them, oftentimes they don't do it transparently and say, here's what we're doing. Yeah, we do allow bullying in the sense that Greg's talking about. We don't like to frame it like that, just like we're racist, and we don't want to say we're racist, because those are pejorative terms. And so what we'd rather say is we have to strike a balance between being, human and allowing certain deviances, because not all these kids grew up in homes where you solve conflict in peaceful ways, and they can't help themselves, honestly. So they're going to do a little bullying. So I know everybody wants to be protected from bullying, but um, you know, sometimes there will be kids doing mean things. We can probably make sure there's no out and out fights or even hitting, but we can't police all this different things, because you can look at people, you can bully people in such subtle ways. And yes, we could get that on camera, but once again, we have to decide what the parameters of our formal organization are. And then we have to let you make the choice. That's why we have this pamphlet that says why you might want to homeschool rather than put your kids in school. And we do it at our own risk, because if we don't have your kid in our school, we're going to lose money. And that is a consideration for our school district. If everybody's homeschooling, guess what? We don't have enough money to even run a school. So this is why we're hesitant to share this pamphlet, because it actually affects our bottom line. This would be like some computer company saying, you don't have to buy our, we have an equal computer that you can buy from our competitor. And we won't get your money and we'll be out of business. And so there's these forces that I'm just describing lightly upon, Jonathan, not as an apologist for the church per se, but just as understanding. I understand why you guys aren't fully transparent. You're not called to be. Apparently, Jesus doesn't want you to be. That's how I resolve it finally in Christ. Like, but will I be surprised, Jonathan, if in 100 years from now that your complaints are actually met, that the people who are called to lead the church, Jesus leads them to a much more transparent, much more robust way in which they interact and share. Yes, I wouldn't be surprised with that. I'd like, oh, 100 years from now, oh, here's how we used to do it. We used to tell people things, but we didn't share like you do in Alcoholics Anonymous. You stand up, yeah, you're a leader, but you say, hi, my name's Greg Muller and I'm an alcoholic. And you start with that base. And then you describe it. Greg, tell us about that. Yeah, I used to do this. I used to do that. Will I be surprised if 100 years from now, some of the best religious leaders do that? No, I won't be surprised. But I don't think maybe we're not even advanced enough culturally to handle that without it having collateral damage. Oh, I wasn't prepared to hear that. That made me go on a binge. Oh, if my leader's like that, I guess it's okay for me to go there too. So I don't know, Jonathan. I have different opinions about that, but here's the thing Jesus told me, Greg, you're a kindergartner. Your ideas are pretty low. So let me guide my church and I will refine it, just like I'll refine you. But he's okay with me sharing my opinions as a human. So I'm transparent, and that's what Jonathan was being. Jonathan's sharing something that a lot of church members would agree and say, oh yeah, loftiness, yeah. And they would agree, but they're not going to share that. They would agree, but they would not put they would not come on camera and say they agree. Jonathan, even himself, he's a risk taker like I am. Yeah, he kind of hesitated. Well, I kind of hesitate. People are going to view me, right? And so I'm telling you what, there's a lot of people that say I agree, but I can't go there. I can't, and that's because we don't live in a culture that encourages. No, tell us really what's on your mind. It's like, can we just go along, get along? You can do that in private, but don't do that on publicly where it's recorded, where people can share it. You could do a lot of damage. And so you have these opinions like, let's play it really safe. But then Jonathan's point starts, by playing it safe, you leave a lot of people just struggling like crazy. They think they're just bad people. And Jesus doesn't. So you're drifting far away from some of the intent of Jesus. I know, but in the words of Jesus, suffer it to be so for now. In other words, yeah, 100 years from now, this will be cleaned up. But you live, unfortunately, if you lived 200 years ago, I'm sorry, you were perfectly right. Women ought to be able to vote, but just suffer it. Just be quiet. Or if you're called to a special calling called women's suffrage, don't be quiet. God will say, sure, most other women need to be quiet because it'll just ruffle feathers. Their husbands will want to divorce them. But certain women, God bless them, 200 years ago, opening their mouth and going, we ought to have the right to vote. Now, just like 2023, like, oh, yeah, that was stupid what we were doing. But we understand, like, oh, yeah, they had their culture. And that's the nature of, if you're going to think beyond where you are, what's normal, you're not alone, but you're alone in expressing it. There's a lot of people like, no, that's not right how we've treated women 200 years ago. But you're going to stay alone. And even the people who agree with you, just like, well, shut up. You're ruffling feathers. You're doing some damage. And that's civil rights. You choose any movement you want, where it was moving like Jesus beyond where people wanted to go. You've heard it said by them of old, but I say, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to say, I'm going to kill you, is what the leaders of that day say. Go ahead and share your opinion, but I'm going to do everything I can to shut you down. And that is a culture that's still with us. So um, we go forward with fear and trembling, and I'm not trembling much because Jesus has been training me to be civilly, meaning kindly disobedient, so people can change the channel. Jonathan and I aren't sticking ourselves in a church and sharing these ideas. No, you're watching this because you decided not to push stop or close on an episode. Okay, go ahead, Jonathan.
So I I think that um, I think that there's an idea of there's the song "Truth Is Marching." What's that
Glory,
song?
hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Yeah.
This is "Truth is marching, truth
Truth
is
is
marching."
mighty. Yep.
And so there's this idea that a lot of people have the idea of like looking back. We got to go back to what there was before, and it's like that's only partially right. It's yes, so there's good things to be kept from the past, but just like you mentioned, like it's like okay, well, do we really need to have slavery? It's like well, no, not even a lot of the founding fathers wanted to keep it, so it needed to go. So I actually, that's a good resolution for me too. Um, I think that's part of why I hesitated to bring it up, and yet I wanted to bring it up. When I was thinking about it last night, I was like, am I going to talk about this on Jesus on this mess? Because this is kind of messy, you know.
Exactly. It is.
I also was kind of in a position of like, well, what do you really think about it? What do you really feel about it, Jonathan? And it was like, I don't quite know. The feeling is like kind of a feeling like when someone throws cold water on you, like, oh my gosh. It was like when I watched that clip, I was like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh. And here it's coming from literally, if there's anybody that I love to hear speak, it's this guy. I think he's great. He's my favorite, you could say. And yet it's like, oh my gosh, like, oh my gosh, and he can't even see it. It's obvious. And yet, he's a good man, a very good man. And so, yeah, I don't think it's anything that's like so much an accusation. Now the evangelicals and the other Christian communities have been looking at Mormonism and saying this for like quite a while. They've been saying like, you guys are so rigid. It's like, a lot of your members are just dying under this, you know, and yet, as LDS people, it's like at the same time, a lot of the same people are saying, "Oh, but you guys are good people. Like, if we're going to hire somebody to be the next VP, we're probably going to hire a Mormon because
That's right.
honest, true, trustworthy,
Yeah.
like, the guy who's, cheating on his wife is also going to, embezzle money. It's like so it's like this high standard um, has made the world respect, you know, uh, Mormons because of they live clean lives. Same with Seventh Day Adventists tend to have a more rigid um, view. They tend to live. I've at least from my few observations, they tend to be more. And I could list a few other sects that are, but it's not the place to go when you're just looking for Jesus and you're a total mess and you can't quite live the standard yet, and you've tried and you've prayed. It's like,
Yeah.
um,
And your plan is to go slow. I'll just keep living with the girl. So it takes you 10 years before you're like, we get married. I'll get off LSD eventually, but I'm in no hurry. And like, well, this may not be the place that has that much patience for you. I'll start wearing church clothes eventually. And, just culturally, you're not fitting, just like you would in public school. Hey, I'm just going to take whatever classes I want, then I'm going to go home. Well, you can actually do that, but they're not going to tell you that. I'm just going to cherry pick and I'll only stay for half the lecture. Well, we got rules. You can't just wander in and out. Why? When I go to conferences, adult conferences, people say, "Oh yeah, I've got something else to do." No, you haven't asked for a potty break, and so that regiment helps maintain management of class. I get it, but it is what it is, and it may not fit everybody. Like we assume this will fit everybody. No, it'll fit the masses, but there's some people who have ADHD. They need to move. Oh, we can't accommodate that movement. We will talk about kinetic learners, but we really still can't accommodate that. We don't know how to teach math using body movement. But we'll talk about how important it is to match people up with their learning styles. But we're still back to book learning. And it's because we're limited as teachers, so we can talk all day and night about how people learn differently, but actually accommodating those, I'm sorry, we will strive to, but we just don't. And we know that tests are stupid, but we're still going to have to do tests because we're in the system where, so a lot of stuff they do, they know is stupid, but they're still going to do it. So they can't accommodate that. And do you think churches are any different? No, they have to do things for a sense of order, a sense of routine, because people expect that. Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, that's the yeah, and I actually, to give credit, I realized the church is actually really good at helping people to repent. It's like they're very loving and very, but I've also found that they don't know what to do with people who can't stop. Um, Now, Alcoholics Anonymous, Sex Offenders Anonymous, or Sexaholics Anonymous, or whatever, like that's a really good place, and that's why. So, like, I know, like, the church has incorporated that as in an attempt to help these people who are so riveted and addicted that and it's very effective, extremely effective, at least more so than other things, but. I was going to say, though, like, I do feel encouraged. Well, and so I wanted to make clear this, like, I don't have a sense of, if I do have a sense of indignation, it's a small one. Because I have a good helping of compassion. It's like you can't always confess everything all at once. You can't be completely transparent all at once. And we haven't come from a world that did that.
No,
It's like my father's generation, World War II generation, you know, he did not, it wasn't a generation of, oh, be transparent and open and soft
no,
and
no. Yeah,
lovable.
parents weren't doing that with their kids. Oh, I've done this. Let me tell you the things I've done sexually, and they didn't know, and they were avant-garde in my father's generation. My father was avant-garde because we had a birds and a bees formal thing, but like now they're saying, hey, parents, you can't just do a birds and bees talk once. You need to keep this as an ongoing conversation. My father's generation, like, oh, I can't do it. I can do it once. Do you know what I grew up with? Hey, see what the cows are doing? That's what people do. That's it. That's what your father said to you. Oh my goodness, that you can actually then now talk about intimacy one time. Um, Dad, you did so good. Oh, hallelujah. Yeah, but that's all. I can't engage. My dad actually could engage, but he had to kind of push through that. But he was unusual because my dad's generation, and so Jonathan and I, of course, are using a parable of understanding or a parallel. Why it's hard for people who have not been trained in being fully transparent, how to have difficult conversations, like we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and still be able to hold it together. and
Yeah.
know what boundaries are and so forth, and do it with compassion rather than like Jonathan. Like, I got a little righteous anger, but I got compassion, which Jonathan does. That's what I love about him, is like he's got compassion for the institution, for the church, as do I. And yet we're not stopped. We're like, okay, we're the generation. What Jonathan and I are doing, 50 years from now, people will be able to will have learned how to do that, because they'll have to, of necessity, and the institutions will start supporting that. No, tell us how you really feel. They won't be afraid of it, because they would be afraid of how I really feel. Like, no, we can handle that, but that would be a collective effort, or be kind of a cultural shift where people could be very transparent. But we do have a generation, not all of them, but a generation that's kind of opposite, because we have the younger generations like, I need a safe space. They're talking, but they're like go in a worse place than their grandfather. Like, I have to have a safe place. Don't talk about that. It's hurting me. But there's another side who's like, come on, let's talk real. All right, here's my laundry list of who I am. And so those two forces are in play right now, and we'll give birth to what, I'm all for the one that gives birth to, let's be a lot more transparent. Let's, Elder Oak says what did he say? We don't give apologies, we don't seek them. I get it. So an institution doesn't want to have to do this game, but it's like, that actually expresses kind of like, we don't want all eyes on our things. Okay, just you're in or out, and maintaining that coherence is no longer going to be viable. That's the only reason it's going to change. It's just not working, and my views won't change it. Jonathan's views won't change it. But what will change it is when the institution fails. All institutions will fail. Prophecies will fail. You don't have to feel bad about that. First Corinthians 13 says the only thing that's going to actually work on earth is charity, long suffering, gentleness, meekness, love unfeigned. In other words, transparent, humble. Okay, here's what I'm dealing with. And yeah, I'm not qualified to set up organizations like that. Only Jesus could. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Well, and who knows what'll happen too. Evolve is another word that comes to my mind, but it has an end. So Joseph said, like everything that has a beginning is going to have an end. That which does not have a beginning will not have an end. So it's like, did the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have a beginning? Yep,
Yep.
at a beginning. There was a date.
Yep. Yep.
Will it have an end? Well, yeah, and we can hope that it'll evolve into something better, something higher. That the end of one thing will be the beginning of something better, for sure that. But there will be people who will fall because they just can't handle it. Kind of like you're talking about. It's like, what if we were to be totally transparent tomorrow? Well, vast droves would leave the
Yeah.
Mormon church.
Even if
Uh,
you're speaking the truth, even if it's part of their life, they do not want to be part of that fully transparent. Just like I could get that my grandfather, like, no, if we're going to talk this freely about sex, I get why we're doing, and I can see why we're doing, and I can see we're trying to do it in the right spirit, but I cannot abide it. I did not grow up this way. I grew up rigid. I'm going to have to die. There's going to be another generation who can talk so freely, and have difficult conversations with people, and not just lose sleep, lose their mind. And we're limited as humans, and that's what we have to understand, our limitations, what we can do within one generation. And so some humans are nimble, so they can actually be forerunners. They can do stuff that will be done later, but others are not. They're not built that way. They're good at maintaining what was, with little bit of change, not a huge amount of change. Otherwise, the center will break. And of course, that's what people like you and I, oh, good. What? Good. Let the center break. But Jonathan and I don't have, Jesus doesn't put wrecking balls in our hands, because he has no intention for us to save any church or any people. He's going to do it. Truth is marching. Jesus is coming for those organizations. We didn't send Jesus. The truth comes and finally disrupts. Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
Well, and I have this sense that for those of us who maybe long for some of these changes, we can also like look forward with gratitude to what's coming and be patient in the sense of, and we can do our best in our personal lives to live by the standard that we hope will be adopted in time. And it's like I can complain and say, well, I wish that, uh, that this church or that, the Catholics have a very similar problem, with the papacy and the cardinals and everybody else. It's very rigid, very, and a very much, so they have a very similar problem.
Yeah, I can see
Uh,
Jonathan going like to the speaker that he loves. Here's what I'd like you to say. If you've ever gone in the ditch, even once, sexually, just and you can do it kind of euphemistically, but everybody knows what you're talking about. Say it. Say it. We'll forgive you. Everyone will forgive you. But understand, I know some people are going to use that as permission. Of course they are. Everybody's looking for some permission. But we got to go there because there's a need. But Jonathan would say, that's my opinion. And he would not force this guy. But that's the kind of thing. And so Jonathan could say, here's a world I'd like to live in where one of my favorite speakers says this, just on the front part of your talk, then say the same talk. And he'd like, nope, I could give the same talk I've given before because of, and he would say, I would like, in fact, if he privately talked with Jonathan, I could imagine this, Jonathan, I would like to do exactly what you're talking about. But you know how teachers are enmeshed within a network? So am I. There are things that you don't have eyes to see, that we are human and we have disagreements, and then we have to resolve those and put on what everybody does, like in a family. Grandma's coming. Let's look like we're a happy family. Okay, so everybody gets it. Okay, when grandma's gone, now we pull out the knives. Why not just show grandma? Why not be transparent? Because grandma will judge it. She won't know. We're trying to be nice to grandma, actually, here, guys. This is a kindness because we're kind of a rollicking family. We're like the Irish. We just talk nasty to each other. This is what our culture is. But grandma's coming. Okay. Oh, let's talk nice to each other. And so, yeah, I can imagine you having that conversation with the general authority. The general authority has trust in you and he becomes transparent. But he says, Jonathan, I see what you want, but I can't even do it myself. That's got to be Jesus. Anyways, any thoughts there, Jonathan?
Yeah, well, and it'll be interesting. So all we're really talking about is is it's like we see that the need has become very, very blatant. It's like, we don't live in the time anymore where it's like a few people are not quite living up, but the majority are staying in the straight and narrow. It's like, no, those days are long, long past.
Yeah.
It's like, children from the time they're young are bombarded with images and
Oh, yeah.
different things. It's like we live in a time where everybody's in the ditch,
Yep.
except for a very few, and the ones who are doing well, I think within the church are the ones who are repenting. It's like the ones who, they realize, man, I got a problem, and they go talk to their bishop or whatever. And I'm trying to think about other organizations, it's like, I guess if you're a Catholic, you go to confession and,
If
and
you're
you,
if you're an alcoholic, you attend your meetings
yeah, if you're an alcoholic, you attend your meetings. And it's
and
like,
you
those
stay
are the
with
people,
your partner. Yeah, your accountability partner. You stay in contact, and you make
those are the
amends.
people,
Yeah.
yeah, those are the people who are finding righteousness. Those are the ones that are finding the atonement. Those are the ones that are finding Jesus Christ, are the ones who are, to me, it's a major big part of repentance is this confession thing. It's like this desire to talk about it. Now, I know that it's like it doesn't happen overnight. I talk freely now about the fact that when I was a young man, I had a pornography problem. But I remember there were years. I mean, I remember I went to the bishop when I was 15, had a discussion, and my life totally changed like almost overnight. I was given what felt to me like superhuman strength. I was still tempted, but somehow I was able to resist, and like things went better. Oh, so much better after that. It was so good. But it took me, I think it took me almost a decade before I ever said anything to anybody but that one bishop. So like I totally get like it takes time to where you can look back in your life and go, oh, it wasn't such a big deal. You know, it's like, but when you're
Right.
still so close to it, it's only
Oh,
been 2 years, it's only been 5 years. I still feel ashamed. And it takes, well, actually, I didn't feel ashamed, but it took me a while to get to where I could be like, oh yeah, it was a part of my life. I got through it. Um, and and so going forward, it's like talking about, and that's why I think it kind of I was like, oh wow, this really needs to change. Like as I realized within the church, it's like, oh wow, this really needs to change because I realize it's like the church as a whole has still not gotten to that place where they finally eased up enough to be able to be like, hey, let's talk about it. And it was like, and I've come to realize how much freer I feel in being able to just talk about it. So I'll tell you an experience, and what I really kind of wonder is, it's like I wonder if the next phase needs to be, and I wonder, you talked about your black sheep prophecy. It's like I kind of wonder if that's why we need some black sheep, some people who've done so much crap in their past that it's like as they're coming into, whether it's the LDS church or any religious organization, it's like, oh, I couldn't even try to cover, it'd be like trying
right.
to cover an elephant, like,
Yeah, yeah. That
it's like,
all of a sudden, most people in the church who are sinners, they're like Joseph Smith. Oh, I thought I was doing dark stuff. Well, yeah, we thought so too. But this person who just came in, oh my
yeah,
goodness, now we all look like Joseph Smith, who confessed. Yeah, he was a little transparent. I mean, euphemistically, yeah, I did indiscretions that are associated with youth, but no one need to think that I did anything big or whatever. And so we grow up in
now we need
LDS.
somebody who's like, oh no, yeah, yeah, I had the indiscretions of youth, all of them.
Yeah,
Like,
that's right.
and they went into my 40s,
Yeah,
and then I
yeah,
found Jesus, and
that's yeah, that's
and that,
right. Yeah, they
oh,
went they went places that would just horrify you. And but I found Jesus, and He even saves people like me. Like, oh wow! So, and that yeah, you're right, Jonathan. That uh, um, well, a thought I wanted to share. Like, oh yeah, go ahead with what you were
I
saying
share
though.
something with that too. What I have a sense too is like we've actually already had that. Like, and the church very much reveres these people. I sent you that link with the girl with
Oh
the
yeah,
tattoo.
sure, yeah.
Uh,
That well, they're
Church
bringing that in.
respects that.
That's right.
They love, yeah. So I sent Greg a link with a girl who came into the church, and God told her to move to Utah, which she in New York the church members accepted her fine, but when she came to Utah, it was like, like she's a pretty girl, and it's like nobody would date her, nobody would, because she had tattoos, because we're also holy in Utah. Anyways, but the point being is so the church has always had that. They've always respected the prodigal son that's come back. It's just here's the issue is that what has been put forth, if not in words, but in is, oh yes, yes, we love the black sheep who come back, but none of us, none of us. Nope.
Well,
In fact, we're going to have people write ensign articles about us that show all of our good points.
yeah,
None of
and
us.
that's right.
None of us,
And
none
and
of the leaders,
yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, now and then, a black sheep will come in and he'll become a bishop or a stake president, but never a general authority.
yeah,
And of
no,
course, that's a big pot rattle ready to burst, because it's
yeah,
like, someday the exposés are coming.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like where we're going to find out that so
yeah.
and so did such and such. But let me just finish the thought and then I'll turn it back. So I have this sense of what's really needed is, it's like we've got to let go to the spirit, because I promise you, it's like if we stop planning everything out, the spirit will prompt somebody in a position of authority who is okay with talking about, mistakes they made in their youth. I promise you, if you stop planning your talks and you let God just tell you what to say in the moment when you're given the talk, somebody is going to be prompted to talk about what they did so that they can help other people who've had the same problem. I promise you, because that's what Jesus does. I want to share this last story and then I'll turn it back. So I remember I was in my 20s and it was a long time ago. I was giving a priesthood lesson. It was actually a special meeting. I don't want to go into the details of all of it, but I was asked to give this lesson and I got up. I had a whole lesson prepared. I got up in front of this large group of men, and the Spirit told me, "You're not going to give that lesson. I want you to talk about your early sexual improprieties." And I remember at the time, so at this point, besides the bishop, there was maybe like one other person I had shared that with. And I remember just like, what? But like I knew it was God's voice. Like I knew his voice well enough. And I was just like, and I literally just stood there in silence for like, I don't know how long. And everybody's like looking around, looking at me, and like, what's going on? you know. And then finally I just looked at, I said, look, God's telling me not to share the lesson I prepared. And I'm supposed to share something that many of you, if you choose to, can use to either think ill of me or to backbite or say bad things about me, but I have to say it because God's telling me to. And then I came out. I just said, look, now I say it all the time. It seems so silly now that I had such a
That's
problem.
right.
It's like, oh, you had problems with pornography. Okay, you and like almost every other,
Yep.
young man on the, in the world right now is having problems. It's like, but at the time, nobody was talking about it. So I remember like I just started in and I just explained it, and it went very, very well. But that was the beginning of me kind of opening up, about this dumb problem I had when I was a young man. But the point is it's like I have this feeling if there's going to come a time, I don't know how soon, when the church that we came out of is going to go back to, you know what, we're going to let the Spirit decide. And what's going to happen is that it's going to be like a powder keg. Things are going to explode. At least I hope it goes that way, because if it goes rigid, more and more rigid, I don't see how that's going to solve some of the problems we're talking about. It's like, but if we can let go and I don't know what the message is for those listening who didn't come from our faith structure, but I know this: when we allow the Spirit to move, it it brings uh, it brings good things, and I think it brings us to more and more be transparent and talk about the things that are hard to talk about. And why? What's the reason? This is the last part. Because it helps other people. And it doesn't help other people when we pretend that we've been better than we've really been,
Yeah,
or that
that's
we're.
a Facebook energy that's killing people right now. I mean, if you want to see the extreme of that energy that you're speaking of, is where people aren't fully transparent. They create a Facebook life, and it hurts other people because it's like every house they go into is meticulous. Well, no, that's just Facebook. That's what people see and want to show, and they want to show that because that's what's valued, and they want to be valued, and that's normal. It's human, but it also then hurts other people. Oh, our vacation didn't go like that. Oh, we never get to go on vacations like that. Jesus must not love us enough, and then they hide in their shame rather than going like, it was a vacation from hell. And then there's people like, oh, so I didn't miss out. Right. I mean, they have compassion. Oh, I'm sorry for that family rather than envious. But Jonathan, I made notes as you were speaking because Jesus said, add that to the black sheep prophecy. White sheep, because the black sheep prophecy prophesies that the first shall be last, the last shall be first. That is, that the last people that you'd see at church, those people that are outcast misfits, God will come into their life and they will have charity for those who are in the formal church. They say they need us. They need a revival, is what the term would be used in Protestant church. That church needs a revival. The people of that church, because they're coming for the people, and they will come. And maybe they even hated the church, and maybe they still do, but God's calling them like He called other prophets who are like, I don't want to go there to Nineveh. Like, go. And then they will go with compassion, and they will love on the people who don't love them. Like, I know you guys don't like people with tattoos and who smell like smoke like me, but God loves you, and I'm brought here. And so that's the black sheep prophecy. But Jesus just told me also it'll involve people who are white sheep, who are possessed by His Spirit, and they will start sharing black sheep stories. Oh, we turns out we had a black sheep in our midst. Of course, people say, I think we're all black sheep, Greg. Right. Okay, let's hear your stories. Okay, well, I'm gonna now go into my white sheep turtle shell. Right. And so that's what we're talking about, is we're all black sheep. But this parable is meant for me to understand that there's going to be this compassion He will pour down. And the last people you thought you'd see at church are coming back, but what they're drawn by is charity. Just as the righteous Nephites would go back to the Lamanites who wanted to kill them and bring that charity, and try to redeem them. And the white sheep would say, we don't need redeeming. We've got the only true church upon the face of the earth. We've got it all locked down. Like, no, that actually is your problem. That's why we're here. And then so that was one thing that I took from what you were talking about. The other thought was, yeah, I don't need to share. Well, I will anyways, because I just want to get it out. If I could go back to my younger self, when I came, I was like 13, 14, and I go talk to the bishop about things that young men might get involved in. I starting with the word masturbation, just to make sure people like, well, I thought he was transparent. Oh, I can be way more transparent. But people aren't as comfortable with talking about that as I am. So don't get me started. But if I could go back, and if the church said, can you go back and what did little Greg need? What did Greg need when he's going to bishop? A little manual that says, here's how you confess your sins. I didn't have that. Like, oh, okay, I was supposed to go talk to the bishop. Well, how much should I share with him? How much detail? Does he want to run a running description and so forth? And you're just left like, okay, so I would be able to help that little Greg and say, okay, so I made you this manual. I'm back from the future, and I'm coming back, and this manual will help you. I just made little bullet points. When you go talk to the bishop, first speak general. He may ask specific. Here's how you'd answer that. Bop, 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 bop. And like, hey, Greg, where'd you get this? I had to make it up. Oh, so in 2023, they still don't have a manual like this? No. Can you imagine that? They're asking you to do something you've never done before. Go confess to the bishop. They don't even tell you what that looks like. Well, it's confessing. It's telling what you did. That's like going for a job interview and going, well, just tell them who you are. No, you go in there with a plan, because they're going to ask you, what's your greatest weakness? I'm human. No, don't say that, Greg. That sounds funny, but it's actually true. But that's not what they're looking for. All right. So what are they looking for? So if this poor young person wasn't trained at home how to confess, no, I don't know. This is a weird confession thing. So I'm just giving that as an example, because it's just the tip of the iceberg. Guys, God bless us. We need some more informal people who are comfortable. The bishop, like, hey, I know you've never done this before, and I know you don't have a manual because the church doesn't have a manual for this. So let me kind of give you a little hint here. It's going to be blah, blah, blah. And that bishop, like, no, if I'm casual like that, then he'll think, oh, apparently it's okay. I'll just do whatever I want as a youth. No, there's danger in that. When he comes in here, I'm going to spout hellfire and damnation combined with a little bit of love. That'll help, Greg. Will it? Is that the best thing? Is that what they're going to do 100 years from now? I guarantee you they're not. It's not like they're just, and of course we don't have to wait 100 years. Jonathan's right. We've come to the time, the hinge point in history. It's breaking, and it's good. And like, well, what should we do? Like, be a little more transparent. Have you ever heard of manuals? You do that in your professional work. They're called little prompts. You help people do things that are hard to do by maybe even making a movie. Like, hey, Greg, watch this movie. This is somebody who's doing a great confessional. A little bit, not too much. Oh, okay. Because I may be on the spectrum. Because the next thing you know, I may be telling the bishop about every single instance. And he'll be like, why is this kid telling me this? Because you provided no guidance. I'm just trying to make sure that all my sins are covered. If I've got to confess, I want to confess everything. Oh, he's an idiot. Oh, all the other kids try to tell as little as possible. And you're trying to cover your sins. So, but do you guys have accommodations for people who are on the spectrum who, when you literally say, confess all your sins, of this nature, you want them all? And why is that not important? Oh, I don't know. I'm not, and so God bless the bishop. I'm on the whatever spectrum I'm on. I can make it hard for everybody. Like, well, what do you want? But that's not my intent. My intent and Jesus's intent, I don't want to make it harder. Jesus says the way is easy. Well, let me tell you what, whatever that year was, that was hard. People say, well, that's good for you. No, it's good to exercise hard, but not when you're trying to do something like confess your sin for the first time. Let's have it be a pretty good experience. Well, did he abuse you? No. I'm talking about, hey, feeling good and saying, I'm going to do this some more. I want to confess some more stuff. Oh, well, we wouldn't want that. Why not? It's not like I'm not going to commit this sin again and again. Let's get good at this, like an alcoholic who goes, yep, I went off the wagon. They don't come out feeling or go into that like, oh, everybody's going to judge me. I don't know what to say. Hey, they just say, tell your story. Okay, well, I went off the wagon, blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay, we love you, Greg. Keep trying, All right. And so anyhow, Jonathan, enough of that, but it's my own personal experience is why I'm kind of on fire about that. I can still like, oh my goodness, I hate walking that awkward road, but that's the time you are in history because I can see the future. Like, I wish I would have had that, but my dad would have wished that he had grown up with better training in the church or in culture to talk about things like masturbation, talk freely with his sons, but which he finally did. I mean, it took him quite a while. I was 18, and then we started getting conversational because he knew, because he had that problem too, like almost all young men. And yeah, it doesn't damn you to hell, and it can be a conversation you can learn. So the first time, yeah, the awkward. Second time, third time, but that was just improv. Come on, church. We can do better, but can we? The answer is yes. My hope is yes, but only what Jonathan's saying. We have to loosen up on all that. Like, let the Spirit, and it's dangerous, I'd agree, so that general authorities just get rid of the teleprompters. Greg does it. Greg's not even trained in this stuff. Jesus TV, here I go. And let's just see what happens. But anyways, only do it if Jesus tells you to do, general authorities. That's what I tell people on Jesus TV. Oh, don't do that. Whatever I just told you to do, don't do that unless Jesus tells you to do it. There, I'm absolved. You're trying to tell the church what to do. No, I'm not. I told them, don't do it unless Jesus tells you to do it. Okay, that's it. I'm out. Jonathan, you go ahead and have the last word.
I'll have the last word then. So yeah, I really love that we talked about this. As we're talking about it, I was realizing how almost like a joyful feeling how joyful it makes me feel. I think it's one of my very favorite subjects is repentance, because it's so everything good in my life has come through this difficult process we're talking about that has become beautiful to me. Being able to talk about your sins is so good. And of course, anytime you have a sin that's active in your life, it's like, yeah, you're not going to want to tell that across any sort of pulpit. You need to talk to somebody privately who's a friend, maybe a group like an addiction group or something. It's like, obviously, that's obvious. It takes time to get to where, you feel okay. It's like it's enough in the past that you feel like you can, just say something. But I do look forward. I look forward to, um, in time. Um, I love the idea of, in all our churches, whether you're a Baptist, a Catholic, a Pentecostal, it's like I can picture people sitting down together, small groups, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, eventually maybe in, in wherein it's appropriate. I've also seen it done inappropriately, where it's you can feel it's not right. Someone's telling something over the pulpit they should not be talking about. But where it gets to where we get to where we can, or they do it in such a way that it's gratuitous or that it's too much. It's like the spirit has to guide, but I can picture this world where it's like, and this love, I can picture someone instead of like, well, if you fall out, shame on you. More like, someone comes, they're like, oh, it's like it just got out of hand. Like I went on this date and it happened. Oh, and someone's like, oh, wow, well, that's interesting. What do you think happened? It's like, was there, like the curiosity goes a long way. Like it's like instead of it being like, oh, that's so bad. It's like, huh, well, okay, well, I guess we gotta figure out what we're gonna do now. It's like I can picture that, and I
Yeah,
can have this. I can feel this healing coming, and I
yeah,
look forward. I'll make that my last comment. I can feel a healing coming, and what does it bring? It's going to bring the lofty, low, all the people who it looks like they're so good. It's going to bring them right down, and the people who are low, it's going to bring them up. The hills will be abased and the valleys will be exalted. I'll leave that as my last comment.
and we'll be on a new vacation, a good one.
Okay.
Hallelujah.
All right.
All right.